Hey loves, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Faith, and today guys, I'll be checking out From Good Intentions to Global Corruptions, The Truth About Affirmative Action by Thomas Sowell. If you guys are interested in this kind of video, give it a massive thumbs up, comment, share, and all that good stuff. And do not forget to subscribe. And without much ado, let's jump right into this video.
Just as we cannot presuppose continuing control over the scope and duration of preferential policies, so we cannot simply assume what will actually happen to those designated as the preferred group or groups. Neither they nor the non-preferred groups are inert blocks of wood to be moved here and there according to someone else's grand design. Both confront laws and policies as incentives and constraints, not as predestination, and react in their own ways. These reactions include redesignating themselves, altering their own efforts and attitudes toward achievement, and altering their attitudes toward members of other groups. One of the reactions of members of non-preferred groups has been to get themselves redesignated as members of the preferred group. This can be done either individually or collectively. Some individuals of mixed ancestry who have been regarded and self-identified as members of Group A may choose to redesignate themselves as members of Group B when Group B is entitled to preferential treatment and members of Group A are not. In the United States, during the Jim Crow era, some light-skinned blacks simply passed as white in order to escape the legal and social disadvantages that went with being designated black. Later, during the era of affirmative action, whites with traces of American Indian or other minority ancestry likewise redesignated themselves in order to take advantage of preferential policies for disadvantaged groups.
Deep.
These have included blonde-haired and blue-eyed individuals with official papers showing some distant ancestor of another race. The number of individuals identifying themselves as American Indians in the U.S. Census during the affirmative action era rose at a rate exceeding anyone's estimates of the biological growth of this population. Moreover, a breakdown of census data by age cohort shows that the number of American Indians increased over time in the same age cohort, a biological impossibility made possible on paper by redesignations of the same individuals. For example, the number of American Indians who were aged 15 to 19 in 1960 was just under 50,000. But 20 years later, when these same individuals would be in the age bracket 35 to 39 years old, there were more than 80,000 American Indians in that cohort. In other words, more than 30,000 people in the same cohort who had not designated themselves as American Indians in 1960 now did so in 1980, causing more than a 60% increase in the number of American Indians in that cohort. A similar pattern emerged among the Aborigines in Australia. A study in that country found that there was a 42% increase in the size of the Aboriginal population between the 1981 and the 1986 censuses, virtually a demographic impossibility in 5 years, except by redesignation of the same individuals with different ethnic labels. As an Australian scholar has noted, the dramatic increase in numbers has much to do with record-keeping, increasing intermarriage, and the growing availability of substantial subsidies to people of Aboriginal descent. The definition of Aboriginal includes many persons of predominantly non-Aboriginal descent who might with equal or greater genetic justification designate themselves as non-Aborigines. It was much the same story in China, where, in the 1990s, more than 10 million Chinese proclaimed their ethnic minority status in order to gain preferential treatment, such as college admissions. Even China's draconian restrictions on having more than one child did not apply to ethnic minorities as they did to the majority Han Chinese. Article 44 states that, in accordance with legal stipulations, autonomous areas can work out their own family planning measures. As a result, Urban minority couples generally may have 2 children, while urban Han are restricted to 1. Rural minorities may have 2, 3, 4, or even more children, depending on their ethnicity and location. An official of China's State Nationality Affairs Committee commented, "Some people would try all means to change their nationality because they wanted to make themselves eligible to enter a university with lower scores or to stand a better chance than their colleagues when it comes to promotion."
Corruption has eaten
As in other countries, people with mixed ancestry had the option of choosing how to designate themselves. Some traced their ancestry back hundreds of years to prove minority blood and claim the benefits. Another individual response to preferential policies has been to use someone genuinely of the qualifying ancestry as a front for businesses seeking preferential treatment in the awarding of government contracts or other desired benefits. This practice has been so widespread in both Indonesia and Malaysia that it has acquired a name, Alibaba Enterprises, where Ali is the indigenous individual who ostensibly owns the business and is legally entitled to government benefits, while Baba is the non-indigenous person, usually Chinese in these countries, who actually controls the enterprise and essentially pays Ali for the use of his name and ancestry. Similar arrangements have been uncovered in the United States and elsewhere. Anti-Semitic policies in Poland during the years between the 2 world wars likewise led some Jewish businesses there to operate behind Gentile frontmen. Decades later, under preferential policies in Kenya, Africans served as fronts for Asian-owned businesses, as they likewise served as fronts for Lebanese-owned businesses in Sierra Leone. Members of some non-preferred groups can also get themselves redesignated collectively. The 14th Amendment to India's Constitution, like the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, provides for equal treatment of individuals, but India's Constitution provides explicit exceptions for benefits to the untouchables, disadvantaged tribal groups outside the Hindu caste system, and other backward classes. This last proviso especially has created opportunities for many other groups to get themselves collectively designated as being among the other backward classes. Eventually, this miscellaneous classification provided more individuals with the coveted rights to preferential treatment than were provided to the members of the untouchable and tribal groups for whom the preferences were created. In 1997, organized efforts were also begun to seek preferential treatment for India's 15 million eunuchs, though obviously they were not the descendants of other eunuchs, and so could not inherit historic group disadvantages. Redesignations of individuals and groups, like the spread of preferences from given groups to other groups, take preferential policies further and further away from the initial rationales on which they were based. No historic sufferings of blacks in the United States can justify preferential benefits to white women or to recently arrived immigrants from Asia or Latin America who happen to be non-white, but whose ancestors obviously never suffered any discrimination in the United States. Similarly, the painful history and continuing oppression of untouchables in India can hardly justify preferential benefits to local majorities in particular states, such as Assam, Maharashtra, and Andhra Pradesh. Yet these local majorities and members of other backward classes outnumber the untouchables and are often in a better position to take advantage of the preferences. Thus, quotas for government jobs or university admissions have often remained unfilled by untouchables, while this has seldom been the case for members of the other backward classes. The spread of benefits from group to group not only dilutes those benefits, especially when more than half the population of the country becomes entitled to them, as in both India and the United States, it can also make the initial beneficiaries worse off after the terms of the competition are altered. For example, in the United States, where hiring and promotions decisions are subject to review by government agencies investigating discrimination, objective criteria may be used increasingly by employers for legal self-protection, even if the relevance of these criteria to the job are questionable. If these criteria are met more often by one of the preferred groups than by another, if white women have college degrees more often than black men, for example, then one preferred group may be no better off, on net balance, than if the preferences did not exist. It is conceivable that they can be worse off. Such a situation is not peculiar to the United States. An official report in India in 1980 noted that the advancement of one preferred group tended to push back another, creating greater tension between structural neighbors in this hierarchy than between the top level and the bottom level. That continued to be so in the 1990s, with violent clashes in several Indian states being found to be more common among competing poorer groups than between those groups and the more elite castes. In 2001, a rally was held in the state of Rajasthan, protesting the inclusion of new groups among the backward classes and demanding separate fixed quotas for original backwards, so that new entrants would not be able to reduce the existing benefits enjoyed by those for whom the preferences were created. Calls have been made for a quota within quota to deal with such situations. Insofar as affirmative action policies are aimed particularly at offsetting existing economic disadvantages, their rationale is undermined when the benefits of these policies go disproportionately to those individuals within the designated groups who are the least disadvantaged, or perhaps are in more favorable positions than members of the country's general population. In India's state of Tamil Nadu, for example, the highest of the so-called backward classes legally entitled to preferences, constituting 11% of the total backward classes population in that state, received almost half of all jobs and university admissions set aside for these classes. In Malaysia, where there are preferences for the indigenous sons of the soil majority, Malay students whose families were in the top 17% of the income distribution received just over half of all scholarships awarded to Malays. In Sri Lanka, preferential university admissions for people from backward regions of the country appear likewise to have benefited primarily students from affluent families in those regions. This should hardly be surprising, nor is it necessarily a matter of corruption. Preferential access to education or jobs is just one factor in getting the education or the job. Obviously, those people who have more of the other factors required are better able to turn preferential access into actual success. Pre-existing prosperity provides more of those other factors. Those American minority business owners who participate in the preferential program called Business Set-Asides under Section 8A of the Small Business Act average a personal net worth that is not only higher than the average net worth of the groups they come from, but also higher than the average personal net worth of Americans in general. A scholarly study of group preferences in India pointed out that preferences that benefit more fortunate members of less fortunate groups borrow legitimacy from the national commitment to ameliorate the condition of the lowest, while at the same time they undermine that commitment by broadcasting a picture of unrestrained preference for those who are not distinctly worse off than non-beneficiaries. Just as specifying the scope and duration of affirmative action policies has proven illusory, so has the designation of the beneficiaries in accordance with the rationales of these policies. Both attempts suffer from assuming far more comprehensive knowledge and control than anyone has been able to exercise in any of the countries in which preferential programs have been instituted. What has also been overestimated is the extent to which the attitudes resulting from such programs can be assumed to be beneficial to the groups concerned or to the country at large. These attitudes tend to respond to incentives rather than to rationales.
Wow, you guys, that was such a beautiful narration from Thomas Sowell. And one thing I'm going to say is that these affirmative actions are in every society, because I can vividly remember when I was in school, some people who call themselves the indigenes of that state were paying lesser fee than I was paying. And they obviously have preferential treatment because they are just indigent of that state. This is a worldwide problem. Corruption has eaten deep into the heart of man that they go as far as declaring citizenship of another another ethnic group so that they can benefit from that particular place. These things are not going to stop. It's going to keep happening. And wow, this was such a beautiful narration from Thomas Sowell. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.